everyone. Welcome to the second episode of our Hostinger Academy podcast. I'm Emma Young, head of content here at Hostinger, and I'll be your host today. So let me start off by introducing our guest. She is a product creator, open source designer, coach, prolific WordPress core contributor, the list goes on. But one of my favorites, one of the design leads for not one, but multiple WordPress releases, Tammie Lister. Welcome to the podcast. I am super stoked to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
So, Tammie, to me, you're a very well-known figure to anybody who's in the WordPress community or anybody that has been to a WordCamp and seen your WordCamp speeches or presentations, but also anyone that has been curious or wants to know any facts about Gutenberg. But because there are some new people to the WordPress community and maybe to this podcast, it would be nice to have a little introduction from you.
Yeah, so I've been involved in WordPress pretty much on and off since the beginning-ish. A couple of years I wasn't, but I started just using it normally, as everybody. And then as everyone's journey seems to be happening, I found myself contributing. And that kind of spiraled into, I was very lucky that I found myself as a core contributor. And I was very lucky to be doing that throughout Gutenberg. Recently, I've been contributing as a hobby, I guess. That's kind of the way that I like to phrase it. And that's been really, really exciting. I kind of have been doing a lot of hybrid work between kind of the design and development. I kind of label that more as the product side. And that's really what interests me.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. One of my favorite things to ask people is to kind of kick it back to the start. So like, what was your WordPress journey like? Was it first WordPress, first WordCamp?
Yeah.
What came first?
The reason how I ended up with WordPress was, I think back in the day, most people thought they had to have their own CMS because I don't know. It was almost like a badge of honor that you were going through the torment of running your own CMS. Mine was highly insecure. Probably I was just by fluke, wasn't getting hacked. That was basically what was happening. But I was using it for blogging. That was kind of my thing. But I like to change things up a lot. And I like to do, back in the day, there was things like CSS Reboot and all those kind of like styling competitions, all those things. And I was super excited. That was what excited me, that I would spend so much time changing things in the back end that I didn't get time to do the fun stuff, which was like writing or doing the community stuff or doing design. So I would end up in just frustration, having to do things that I wasn't very good at. I was learning, great. And someone said, hey, this WordPress thing, it kind of has a theme engine. Kind of didn't compared to what we know about theme engine now. Try this. So I did. And didn't look back. I'd always kind of been very curious about open source from a Linux perspective. And then I just dove right in and kind of, it solved my problems. Initially, I was like, nothing can, it does. I think that was the way. And for a long time, I didn't go to WordCamps, particularly, being in England, they weren't necessarily that many. There wasn't necessarily that many options for me to go or do anything. But I was kind of having a business and working. And then I went to my first WordCamp and just started diving in. I kind of see it as a spiral sometimes of contribution where someone just does one thing and then gets sucked more in a beautiful way to just contributing more things and then becomes a full-time contributor. That's what happened to me.
Okay, right on. What was your first WordCamp?
My first ever WordCamp was down in Portsmouth. That was my first ever WordCamp.
Yeah, right on. I've taken a ferry from there. That's my only experience there. But right on. Okay, cool. So that's a very fun journey. I would love to ask you like what your topics were about with your first WordPress blog, but
they were just design, and it was just life design. And back then you would write, kind of have networks, and you would kind of write about, or kind of like, it was back in the like blogging community time when people would share like tips and tricks and design and all those kind of things. It was early. shall we say.
Yeah.
But it was a kind of
Yeah.
like exciting time where we were like discovering new things to do with CSS, which now seem very naive and beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what was then your first, or no, I'm going to actually dial back a little bit. So like, since WordPress has come a long way from what you were just talking about, and then as a content editing tool, we saw the transition go from classic editor to now Gutenberg. Well, that was, well, not now, like 5 years ago. And now you're able to do pretty much everything, design an entire website with blocks. It's just been like a beautiful transition. So since you were the very first design lead for Gutenberg, can you walk us through how that happened? Like, did you just volunteer as tribute or like fight for it?
I actually was the second. The first went on paternity leave, Johan. And I also think in name, yes, but so many other people got to do it. But I was the first for the release. And I think that's really important to also say. I think it's really important that everybody gets mentioned. That's also kind of my thing, because I think the project the first went on for such a long time. I think anyone that was involved in that, their name needs mentioning because of that. So I was asked to do it. I was in a very luxurious and great position that I was working full time on the project. So I was in a position to be able to devote my time to it. Most of the people who worked on it, it kind of became this awesome collection of people who had experience through theming, who had experience from UX. I'd been working particularly around, in my past roles, the trouble with user experience in theming. That had been kind of my thing, and I've been building up through it, through themes and that. So the alignment was really strong, setting me on the path. Whilst that wasn't phase one, it kind of, a lot of the groundwork in phase one really was about that, because you have to do the foundation before you can go into kind of site editing. So that was how I ended up doing it. And it was a really, the one person isn't one person. One name, you see like 20 other people. And that's really like one of the powerful things about the release, I think. It happened with a smaller group, and then just more and more people joined. And towards the end, particularly for the big release that we finally did, there were so many people involved. Like it was beautiful to see as well. So
like talking about like the size of the project from when it started to now, like how do you even lead something like that that's open source and people collaborating from all over the world? Is there a lot of project management or a lot of just hoping?
So I think if everybody in the project goes into thinking about how do you lead it, you probably wouldn't even start. I think in reflection, there's naivety. I think that's how a lot of things happen in open source. It's just the people talk about scratch that itch. It's that like that there's a passion to do something and a naivety that you can get it done. And naivety can be amazing. It's not like a bad thing, because sometimes it just moves mountains. Right? Sometimes you just get things done because you're just like, this could be done. And a lot of if you even think back, the processes didn't exist. If you think back to, I sometimes remember when I first turned up in core and it was loud, right? And then when I turned up to contribute to Gutenberg, core was quieter, but it was still really loud. All the processes and the organization that has come through the project, we've had to do that because we've stubbed our toe or discovered that there were problems, like the Gutenberg release process, the 2-week cycle, the having it as a plugin, the testing, the getting feedback, the closing the product down in the plugin, and then putting it into core, and how we do that, and every single thing that didn't exist. So all of those structure, you can't really say this is a framework that comes from a different open source and then apply it. Even down to, we didn't even know at one point what language we were going to be using. There was that kind of like what language license fits, right? There was all that discussion that I think that's sometimes forgotten with Gutenberg. Like there was time we weren't sure what it was going to be coded in.
Yeah.
Never mind what the experience looked like. The underneath experience could have been very different depending on what language we went for and what license happened. So all of those things, there's that ship of thesis post. It wasn't just the interface that was being changed and done while we were doing it. It was the entire process of creating a project. I think it is better, but I think it is something that needs that constant iteration. A good example is I haven't done a couple of releases of WordPress, and I'm coming back and doing one, and I'm finding things that are different. And I love that because it means that iteration is happening and people are learning and learning better ways. So there's that. Experimentation is another one. So Gutenberg exists because people experimented 5-6 years before the project kicked off. And that's, these ideas, there was something called Parrot, there was something called, all these kind of different experimentations happened and then could fuel, because you don't just wake up one morning in a fever dream and say, I have an idea of everything that goes together. That's not what happened.
I literally wrote that down as a question. Did you just wake up one day and was like, this is what's going to happen?
Yeah. I would love to think that could happen, but I don't think anyone's. I think different people have different visions. There's this beautiful. I'm all for remembering sources, but there was some parable, some philosophy of some ancient story where some wise people are trying to describe, and they're saying, I think it's an elephant or something they're describing, and they're not looking at it, so they're trying to describe like a leg and a trunk, and you can't do it, right? You can't describe it. You need to see the whole picture. So someone's probably got the trunk. Someone's probably got the leg over here somewhere of Gutenberg. This is weird.
But it's perfect. Yeah, okay.
And that's what happens, right? You put it together. And that's what happens with releases. You'll see these like, this is what we're going to do in phase 3. That's a very broad, beautiful scope of what we could do in phase 2 or phase 3. What we will do will change. And it will change based on reality, and it will change based on experiments. Phase 3, someone could come up with this incredible experiment that then completely pivots. Some technical roadblock could happen that's like, we actually can't do that for 15 years. I'm not saying that would happen, but if that happened, or we can do that because it exposes everybody to X or Y, or this causes this problem, or our technology can't do this on this hosting or that hosting. That's why the community input, I think, became very apparent in Gutenberg specifically. Core always had community, but Core wasn't, it was complicated, but it wasn't. It was quite simple. It didn't feel simple, right? But it was simple.
Maybe for you. Whenever I look around, I'm like, ooh.
Well, now it isn't simple. That's kind of what I mean now. Now it isn't simple because it's got so many tech stacks, so many complications just for core. It used to be that the core product felt like everyone had quite a good grasp on it, quite a good knowledge, could kind of know where things were, if things were quite stable. The only kind of unknown a bit was like the new customizer, which was not new at that point, right? The newest thing was not new. But then all these new things come and everything feels really confusing and really like big. And so it takes time to kind of understand that as well. So it's by finding out like the performance initiative and all that kind of work. I don't think a lot of that happens. And sometimes you have to have a strong need for something for it to happen to move you forward. So,
What is like the feedback kind of loop? Is it? Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I think that also comes into it because I think it used to be our traditional feedback loop was make an issue. Then it was make a ticket on track, which is like if we go back in the day, it basically was make a ticket on track or put something in a forum. Now the forum was generally our way of trying to be user friendly because it was like our forums are user friendly because it's a forum, right?
Yeah.
Still, that's quite a technical hurdle. Track, huge technical hurdle for anyone that I would say is using GitHub over Track. And that's not, I can use Track and I have a soft place in my heart for Track just because I've used it so much. But just from a usability perspective, it's really, really difficult. And just the interface is incredibly daunting psychologically for somebody. And with issues, you have templates and it just feels a lot easier for people. But that kind of is our feedback loop, is go and report it somewhere and then it'll get picked up somewhere and you'd have to know the channels. So part of kind of Gutenberg was, we can't make this in an echo chamber. And that was kind of what was happening a little bit at one point. You need to kind of, at various points, you need to open feedback, close feedback, open. It's kind of like...
Definitely.
If you... I think visually. So again, there's this visual of like the ultimate Swiss Army knife, which is like got every single tool that you would ever have. That's what you would have if you listen to everyone's feedback in open source. You would have a project that had
100%.
every single Gutenberg did not need to be like that for phase one. It doesn't need to be like that at all. That's also what plugins are for, right? Like if you want something to be incredible, like build yourself a hook on that can kind of do that, and build yourself something that hooks onto here and then hooks onto here. And that's what they do, right? Don't think of it as core. So part of what we needed to do was, one, know where your hooks needed to be so that you could do it, to extend it. Two, know all the different voices. So we needed to hear agency. We needed to hear, product people. We needed people to create things. We needed to hear multilingual, not just the voice of just English speaking, all those kind of things. It was so difficult to get that when you're this little project off to one side, which initially it was, and then you're getting it. So calls for feedback, if you kind of go back there, we never had calls for testing. We didn't really have that. We didn't really have when we did have it, it was a big thing in WordPress. It was like a big performance, right? It would be a big kind of effort. So we tried to do it. We tried to make it more of a habit than a big thing. So we'd have testing tables, tried to get not just the same people doing it, trying to get people who were developing it to get exposure to people listening. I did some user interviews in Japan. That was amazing. Just seeing how different people, like what plugins they use, setups people had was really powerful. And I think just, again, setting up that habit of getting feedback, not just expecting someone to come with an issue, and actually going out, and now you have the testing, the full calls, the hangouts, all of those kind of things. They've kind of grown because this need to just listen outside that box. You don't create the next evolution of WordPress just by listening to the people who are full-time contributors. They want to also do that. And I think that's the thing. I went out and saw how people were using. That was one of my thing. I went to newsrooms and I got this luxury of seeing, but not everyone could do that. It was also before the pandemic. It was a good idea.
A little easier then.
It was a little easier. Flights were cheaper. But it was a luxury to be able to do that. So we did do some recording of that and sharing information where we could and just trying to report back. But there was something about having testing tables. And I think just trying to keep that muscle going. The hallway hangouts I love that we have now. And that surfacing of tickets. Someone maybe has an hour where they can jump in and they can do something. Well, now you can do the full site editing calls for testing. So they can do spend an hour a month or however frequently it is and just run something, build a front page and then give your feedback. But you're actually doing a user test, but in your home. And things like that are really powerful because you learn how to post it on the blog. You do it in your own time. You can do a video, and that kind of feedback could be from anyone. It can be from someone who's in higher education. That's a strong area of WordPress. All of those kind of areas is super important.
Yeah, I didn't know about that last one. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to look more into that. But and that's also super motivating. Like that you're able to do it from all over the place, and you don't have to be a contributor, like you said, to be able to contribute without being a contributor, I guess. Yeah. So, but like,
that's the thing, you are becoming a contributor. And I think that that's the thing. When we say the word contributor, we sometimes think like either one particular team, or we think core design, or, we think of narrow little teams, maybe community or polygons. But contributor to me means you move the project on in some way.
I like that.
So
yeah, definitely. And well, moving the project along, like what keeps you motivated to keep working on WordPress?
I think as long as there are problems. I mean,
You're stuck with us forever.
I'm pretty into the fact that there are always going to be this need for editing and this real ability to give someone a voice through writing. The extensibility as well. I come back to this. How can you have this foundation that works, but then how can you have it that it's like a toolkit that someone can build these amazing things in front of? Gutenberg talks about blocks, there's that kind of Lego thing. I love that idea that you have this foundation that's a best bet, but it's not everything. And then what does someone create from it? And this kind of community has more experimentation in it than I think it's sometimes aware of or remembers. And that keeps me coming back. That gets me excited. How can we get the core raised so that then more experimentation can happen on top of that, if that kind of makes sense. That's kind of always my vision, is that if core is better, then anything done on top of core will be even better. That's always in the top of my mind. But editing, how can we make that the best that it can be? So then what can you do with those kind of tools is always really exciting to me.
Yeah. And so like maybe like with those tools that you've probably worked on, are there any like tips or tricks that you would give or like tell any of our listeners to building their first website with Gutenberg?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things I would say is don't go against the site editor. So there's so many good themes out there. Use them. Full site editing as a sliding scale is another big tip. Sometimes people think I have to do everything. So sometimes people are like, I have to do templates, full site editing. I have to start everything in there. No, you could just colorize some text in. If you want to develop with it, just have like a theme JSON, or don't. Like, it's up to you. It's a sliding scale. It's not everything. It's a choose your own adventure. That's what it is. But also look at the themes that are out there and look at people who are building on top of it, for building it yourself. Understand the patterns. Don't load too many blocks to start off with. Know the core blocks. And I think that that's something, when you turn up, and it was a bit of a habit back in the day of how many different, there are some amazing block libraries. I am not dismissing them, but one of the first steps should not be install all the block libraries. One of the first steps should be, what do you have in your room before? It's like moving into a house that already has furniture and buying 4 beds when you've already got 2. And you've only got 2 people staying there, right? Figure out how many beds you need. And are they the right beds? Maybe they're the wrong beds. Great, swap them out.
Yeah.
And think of it if you have too many things, you're back to that interface where there's too many things. You search for quotes, you get 100 block styles, and you can turn things on and off. Block styles, you can turn them on and off. And you don't have to learn everything to start off with. Use the default theme, use the core blocks, and just start to get to know it. Start using it. And then slowly, there's something called Create Block theme plugin. And the terminology, it's a plugin that you can either do child, or you can just, and it basically forks for you, the plugin, the theme. Okay. And so you can do it with the default one, and then you can start making your own themes that way. It's the easiest way to start making your own themes without learning how to code. So if you want to start doing that, start doing it that way. Just slowly kind of put your little toes into it. You don't have to just jump into everything, but there's so many good themes out there. Do that first of all, and then see if one fits. Do a bit of global styling. Just enjoy using it first of all. You don't have to become an expert at like theme JSON and block locking and how to write your own block and all this kind of stuff. You could just use core blocks, use a really amazing theme, and then you could be good. So
that's true. Okay, so then jumping to the other scale, on the other end of it, what is there like some cool new thing that you've recently discovered, or if somebody has been playing around with?
So I really like the WP pattern stuff coming up, which is basically, I want to phrase it in the right way because it's a new feature coming up, but it's basically how reusable blocks should have maybe been, but it's looking at...
Tell me more.
It's a WP pattern is going to be a reusable pattern is the best way to describe it. And it's a way that you could declare it and use it. It may or may not have a visual interface early. It may or may not be in the next release, or might be in the one coming up, but it's basically WP pattern. That's the function name so far. But that I'm really interested in. The locking functionality, I think, is really, really powerful for people coming up. And that's not dismissing, I will go back, reusable blocks. I just think that reusable blocks aren't useful how people use them. I think patterns are one of those people. Yeah, patterns are one of the most, like, blocks are amazing, but the moment that patterns kind of came there, you could see people like go, oh, I get this. Because templates are great, but they're big. Blocks are great, but they're tiny. It's like that Three Bears, right? The patterns are just right porridge. And a reusable pattern that you would also be able to potentially, depends, at a code level, depends, potentially. It's very early days, so I'm using so many quotes. There's like an issue and there's discussion around this. Be able to set what you would control. That opens up a lot of extensibility for agency, extensibility from a product perspective, like all the things you wanted, one from controlling, but also from prototyping. It's just because reusable have been very like stuck, and they're very like, it's like if you fork in time and you just freeze it, that's kind of what you're doing, and you're not able to do anything really. This doesn't do that. This means you would have control and you'd have an interface, and I'm very excited about.
I'm so curious. I wish I could just see inside your brain right now and understand, but I will be patient and wait.
It's not my idea. This is like a GitHub issue that I'm following. So this is not me.
I'll have to look up. Maybe I see what I'm going to try to find after this.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's super exciting, because I definitely think I fall into that category of I use reusable blocks a lot, but the way that you're describing these patterns is something that is going to be a game changer for me. So, but talking about Gutenberg and Blocks, how do you see them? How do you see it in comparison or amongst like builders and like web creation tools and that? Like, are they? What is the verses like in your head right now?
Yeah, so I think I go back to the seeing it as a boost. I don't think it's been fully unlocked. I think some unlock it more than others. It's that bit. I never think that core people can have. This is like my own personal opinion. I don't think core is ever going to fit everybody. I don't think it's part of being core. But what it should do is have the tools for anyone that wants to do anything. That's kind of like if it hasn't got your hook or it hasn't got your extension, it should have it. That's part of it. So really, that's where I see the site building aspect. I kind of see the site editor phase. I know what it was called. I totally get that, but I don't see it as a page builder. I see it as providing the bare minimum of what you need to then take that experience where you want. I don't think that has fully gone yet, where it could, if you talk about like AI, you talk about all the kind of things going on, that is part of my brain that gets very exciting. But that kind of things, that's where now we've got these tools building on top of those. That's where it gets really exciting, because you have that basis to then go. Yeah, to me.
Yeah. Is there, okay, so then are there any like AI plugins or any AI ideas? Like what's going?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that really interest me, and this is all just like my head I guess. I love some of there's an AI kind of one-day conference next week, which I'm really excited from Human Made. Just the experiments that people are doing. I love in this community when anyone is experimenting because it gets me giddy, because it means that people are starting to think super exciting about it. The things that interest me about AI are probably, there's probably a couple of different, but two real main ones at the moment. One, what are the real mundane, boring housekeeping, editing tasks that we do that the AI can do? And I kind of think about that in the sense of, like in the future with like cartoons, like the robots doing the housework. That's what AI should be doing, like from outlines through to like, how can it be? And then some more the prompt-based stuff is more like recommend me this in the style of, or reiterating like Go by Grammarly or those kind of stuff. That's more the kind of like robot housekeeping stuff. That's really, really exciting. I think we're going to see a lot of that coming up. That fits very much to like our editing aspect. The bit that really excites me coming from an art background is kind of the more generative kind of how can we bring in the styling responding to the content. That I'm very excited about. Because if you look at art is far more ahead of us in terms of generative art than technology. We're not implementing it, but products are implementing it in a different way. But generative art has been implementing and playing with this for a very long time. So looking at kind of some of that and how can that be brought in, that's one of my interests at the moment. Down to like parsing an article, getting its mood, and then recommending styling based on that mood. That's something that could happen, and it's really exciting to think about that. It sounds hard or weird, but it also sounds very expected now, which is something you maybe wouldn't have at the year. At the beginning of the year, it would sound very science fiction to say that, but now it sounds like, oh yeah, normal. Oh yeah, that's going to happen in like a couple of months or something. So that also excites me, but how we can do that and do it in a way that just has some beautiful open source technology and how we can get some innovation. That's just people to experiment. I think we had the opportunity to really see how we can do some wacky experiments. You go back to the original themes, right?
They're so good.
Yeah, they were beautifully wacky, and I love that. And I want the same for AI. I want some of that, because if you look at some of the generative art, some of the early generative art is wacky. And it's great because of that. And I think if we take this a little bit too, like it's got to be serious and kind of do that. I think it could be creative as well. So I'm kind of curious at how we can do that, because we're creating content and that's what we're doing. But on the more serious side, outlines, summarizing, recommending, all of those kind of things, I think is incredibly useful. Pattern recommending, I see you've used these patterns like a helpful clippy. All of those kind of things.
Oh.
Clippy will finally be helpful.
I know.
Gutenberg Wapoo will come and offer you patterns or something. But that's like recommendation engines are going to be more useful. All of those kind of things. You've got I think it's command prompt or something coming into WordPress where you're having it's kind of like, this looks a little bit Alfred-y, that kind of prompt that comes over. Search will actually be not just searching, it will also be recommendations, all those kind of things. When that comes with editing, recommend me an outline based on the topic of an idea. It does become as good as your input though. So it's up to us to start thinking in that way, which is kind of the interesting, we've got to think in prompt-based stuff.
Yeah, that is really interesting that you said, like, I never even thought of it that way. Like last year, we never would have imagined having this conversation probably like as soon as we did. And it just shows how much
if I said the word prompt to you, you wouldn't have thought that it would be a chat GPT.
Yeah,
or
like
a prompt, right? And that's now you're just like, I know how you compose prompt. It's like, how does that become a normal bit of our language in just a couple of months?
In just a couple, that is interesting. That's weird to think about as well. But yeah, okay. So like that much can change in what, through 2, 3, 5 months. I don't know when AI started really trending. So for Gutenbergs also changed, a lot in the last 5, 6 years. Tying in those two together, what do you think it could look like then in 10 or 20 years? We're doing WordPress 20th anniversary right now. So maybe WordPress 30th anniversary? How
I
wild?
hope it's around in some form, but I hope it has different people. I think that's the big thing. Well, due to age, it probably will.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah.
But I also think that that's part of it, right? We need fresh generations. We need fresh perspective. Like my views are my views, but it's an older view. I think we need like younger views. I want to see less, and this is quite interesting as someone who's an interface person, but I want to see more about what can be done with the toolkit. We're talking about like one of the things that interests me is where can we have this, when I say design system, I don't mean like the design, but where can like the system and the toolkit and where can you build from that? So if we have things like that in the next couple of years, that sets us on the ground for being around in a few decades, because then we have the potential for people to really productize, take it and grow it. Otherwise, someone is going to, there's like a checkbox of things that you need in a modern project. And I hate to admit it, one of those is like design system, but there's like a shopping cart list that people are asking for. And it's not a Figma file. So there's a few things we need to do housekeeping wise to do that, along with, as always, keep contributions. I hope that we see just experimentation. I think that's always been the beautiful thing about open source is it's given the space for people to experiment. It's given the space. I hope we see investment. I think we're starting to see that people are saying, hey, if we invest in this space, we can actually have some really small, amazing companies. We can invest in some diverse people. We can invest and encourage some really different products and different voices. I hope that grows and continues. That really excites me because it gives the potential for not the same people. I hope that we have a space which means that if someone needs to pivot or they need to get a job, they can find it in this community. That's always been something about this community. Down to our job boards at WordCamps, they were always our thing, right? Down to turning up, contributing. That's always how many people have been on that path. I have so many people who have been, you turn up, contribute. Some people it takes a long time, some people it takes a short time, people change, whatever. But if we can keep that path for people, we can keep that path for some generations even. I think that's just one of the smallest things, but one of the beautiful things. But also seeing that it's not just the same voices. I want most of the things I've ever put into WordPress to not exist anymore, because then that means other voices have been part of WordPress. I think
that's beautiful. I like that.
Yeah, I love it when I see something like that I've created get overwritten.
Actually, you know what? That is like that innovation and like always that not need, but like to always improve. Yeah, I know that feeling as well. Like when somebody can find another way to do that.
Such a kick out of something like if I see a patch or a PR or just something that just goes over a bit of work, particularly I don't know, it's me, I'm weird, but if I know that it took me ages and I felt that I'd got the best solution, and then someone comes on in a really time and they're like super young and amazing and they've done like this like really great, I'm like,
yeah, well, that makes so much sense. Yeah, no, I get that feeling as well. Yeah, that's great. We should definitely try to spread that word. I'm going to take quotes from that and just like blast it as much as I can, because I liked the way that you worded it. That was great. Yeah. Now I lost my train of thought, because now I'm just thinking like, oh man, if we keep doing that, like just in the world in general, not just in WordPress. Imagine
we focus too much on legacy, right? We focus on like the legacy stuff, and I don't think we've done it a little bit. There's a little bit of that. There's a term navel gazing of like the legacy of work, and it's great. We've got to remember where we come from to remember where we're going. But I don't want people to be talking about Gutenberg in 10, 15 years. I want people to be talking about Bert or whatever the next Gutenberg is. I don't know what the next Gutenberg is. I don't know. It's something called Bert, please. I should never name things. But whatever it is, it should be that. Or maybe we just talk about WordPress. But that's what you should be talking about. And there should be new people, and there should be stronger, and that's the healthiness of this.
You want Gutenberg to the classic editor to happen again with AI?
I would actually love that. I wouldn't like I think we've got to get used to changing things more frequently. I think if we don't, then we're not going to be so free. This is just completely my opinion, but I think we tend to get very tied to interfaces. And one of the problems going forward from a usability perspective, I think, is going to be if we're too tied to any interface, because that then means that extensibility is going to be quite limited. It means that one size doesn't fit all if you're thinking about accessibility. One size doesn't fit all if you're thinking about usability. Anything. So if Core has made decisions, because it's going to, about how things work in Core, that's not going to fit everybody. As we have Asian contributors, that's not going to fit them. As we have younger contributors, that's not going to fit them. And as we have whatever devices we have in 10 years, I don't know. Maybe we go big devices. Now we've gone really small. I don't know. Maybe we're just all projecting onto we're projecting onto fridges. So what we're projecting onto mirrors and
don't they have those already?
Yeah, but will it be mirrors and glasses will be more normal? Like any glass surface will be more normal to project onto. And if that's the thing you're interacting with more normally, the interface doesn't matter then, because the interface is completely customized. So we cannot be so obsessed with this is classic, this is this. It's what are you using it on and what do you need to achieve to do it on? So
that is bizarre.
I on purpose have a lot of different devices. Yes, okay, I'm still using one editor, but I actually would like different editing experiences depending on what I'm doing in different things. Sometimes I love using Bear Editor because I like composing my stuff, or Ulysses because I like composing them offline, and then I like to bring them into WordPress. I like different experiences for different things.
Yeah. Was the to get the user interface for the original, the OG Gutenberg blocks? I think I've seen them. I don't know if it was your website or I've seen drawings and sketches of it. Was it hard? How long was the process to decide on which ones?
I think that, again, trying to find the medium. So I've done some sketches and try. There was no real. The language was TinyMCE. That was really the language of the editor, was an inherited language of the editor, and a language that had been built up over time. It's like a language that's passed on by folktales. That was kind of the language of the classic editor. That was what it was, right? It was a language of things that added on, right? But it wasn't ever thought about, how do you drag and drop? How, if we were designing from the ground up, how would we do this? We had a lot of prior art, there was a consensus thinking of hive mind across multiple projects, not just WordPress, of block editors. Block editor now is known as a term. And back then it was more known as a term, but pretty much there's a standard. You say block editor, you think about just like Google comments, right? You think about it in your brain, and it's what WordPress looks like. But then everyone was kind of working it out, right? So it's that. The first version does not look like what it looks like now. And that's beautiful. The first version was the amount of times the options and the arrows have moved. It's at some point, I would love someone to do a word count talk of how many times have the options moved, because or the toolbar changed. So good. Yeah, the toolbar has changed so many times. These little macro things have changed so many times. Because feedback. Another one that was just I actually want to talk on this was the toolbar by the block or not by the block or up. And we even did usability testing on that, and it was 50-50. So we had to put an option in there because some people liked it by the blocks and people didn't like it by the block. And there was so many opinions. Some people were like, absolutely have to have it by the block. And then some people were like, no, if we don't, we have to have it up here. And we did some tests and it turned out it was 50-50. But things like that go back to it's personal. Now, what I would love to see in the future is just more experiments with that interface. I actually would love to see. I don't think we've seen a few brave souls have done a little bit, but until that interface has been stable, and it's only really this last kind of release in a bit, phase in a bit, I don't think we've had like people who've been like, oh, okay, the code is stable enough that I can now build on top of it. But imagine like, what's the most minimal editor? Or what's the editor that is perfect if you were only writing code samples? What's the editor that you need if you're writing, only doing photography? There's different experiences for the editor that could be better than the default one. But we still only have the default one.
Yeah. Do you think it could ever be customizable?
Like, I mean, it can be now. It's just a little bit different. At the code level, you can customize it. You just would be kind of plug it. This is kind of where I think there are opportunities from a plugin perspective to really not just focus on like the front or not just focus on like blocks, but to focus on like how can the experience of the editor actually kind of be changed. How can you, so we've had like some, like you got the full site and there's been a little bit of it, tiny little bits of it. And I think as more happens, we're going to see more of kind of, and as we go to multilingual, as we go to kind of revisions and as we go to collaboration, people are going to understand it a bit more. It's quite complex as you get into like the editor. So it's also kind of the complexity. A block is relatively, like there's tutorials more on it, but the tutorial depth gets quite narrow when you're trying to find one on like how to hook into like change the styling of an editor. There's not as much about that, but there's going to be more as we're looking in that space with collaboration and all those kind of things. So.
Nice. So are you still quite active in the design teams? Are you leading or co-leading anything? Or
for 6.3, I'm one of the leads, and I'm for 0.4, I'm coming back for the women and non-binary release as well.
I'm trying to get in on that somehow. So
I am so happy.
Yeah,
it's going to be really. I'm going to be doing design for this one, and then that one I'm hoping to kind of be popping in with some code. And I'm really excited about how to kind of take what we learned in the first one and really try and take that kind of mentorship level back up again. So 6.3 is about kind of writing down a lot of what I've learned over the years in the design leading, and then putting it together, get some mentoring done so that I kind of pass that on to people for 6.4. And then I can go and do something new for 6.4. That's what I'm hoping for.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to that. That's so cool. I was trying to creep around today to find any information on that, but I got all of the inside scoop from you. So it's perfect. I just looked down at the time right now and I didn't realize how fast time flies. But I mean, I would love to ask you so many more questions, but I have you on Slack, so I can just do that as well. But I do have the last one, which is talking about WordCamp Europe coming up in Athens. Will you be there?
I will. I am going to be there, and I'm really looking forward to going there as well. So WordCamp Europe has a special place in my heart, so I'm looking forward to going there. I'm just looking forward to hearing some talks, going to Contributor Day. I love going to these kind of big Contributor Days, mainly because the moving between tables is just so easy when everyone's in the same room.
I didn't realize that. Yeah. I had my first one at WordCamp Asia was my first Contributors Day. And I was also volunteering. But so I did a little bit with docs and then a little bit of interviewing. And then I was like, am I allowed to go check out marketing table? They're like, yeah.
That's what I love. Photo. I like it if you can move, because I just want to be involved in so many different things. That's just me. Like, great and your team's great and I want to be involved with you. And you can do that. And generally, like, the really interesting discussions happen when you get multiple different teams together and start talking about it. So yeah, you can kind of do that between. And I left them there before because there's something about having that energy before. And then I always you get to go home on the Sunday, which is kind of nice, or sightseeing, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. And then, like, I feel like everybody kind of, like, if it's your first one, you, like, everybody's friends after Contributors Day. And then it's like WordCamp is like, oh, hey,
and a lot of high conversations. And you've got them out of the way, so then you can get down to your WordCamps. But it's going to be really interesting. I think there's going to be some different kind of talks, which I'm kind of interested to just kind of sit and it's going to be very warm, which is going to be great. So we just hope that there's like a bag of fans or something. That's what I'm hoping for.
It's going to be quite the temperature change from where you and I are at. So we'll have to enjoy it while it lasts. But I'm excited to see you. I will do a slow beach montage run to you. I hope that you embrace me when I see you at Contributors Day, or it's going to be super awkward. But yeah, okay. So before we finish up, is there anything else that you would like to say to our viewers, WordPressers, anybody that's listening into this?
So I just really would encourage people to start experimenting. I think that's one of the opportunities that we have at the moment. There's a lot more stable than you think there is in the kind of phases. I think the phases have progressed more. Like, we always talk about the new editor. It's not new anymore. So being able to kind of say, okay, what do we have now? What could we experiment? What can we learn from it? And then what is upcoming and what can we start experimenting ahead to and thinking with? And from that, getting our kind of mind into it is really useful. There's so much, people are going to start focusing on kind of AI and getting excited. That is amazing, and there's some excitement there, but how does that kind of fit in with other things? So just start exploring. Sometimes you can just do a napkin sketch. Sometimes you might be a developer. Sometimes you might be a designer. Sometimes you might go to a contribution day, speak to another developer, and a designer might speak to each other, and then a beautiful product design can kind of come from that. But just start experimenting, I think, is really important in WordPress. We used to do a lot more of it, and I would like to see us do a lot more again.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Tammy, for talking with us and for all of your insights. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And I know I speak for not only myself, but the listeners when I say we have really enjoyed it. And for all the listeners out there, we will both be at WordCamp Europe in Athens. So please come find me, find Tammy, say hello, do a little dance, whatever floats your boat. And don't forget to stop by the Hostinger booth and have a chat about WordPress, hosting, life, love, and rock and roll. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I wish you all the best and see you in the next episode. Bye.